is Emily Iannielli, and I'm a male to female transgender woman. And I had a very interesting day today. Actually, I got a call from a young lady. She's a sweetheart, and I was very impressed. Her name, and I don't think it'll be a problem to share it. Her name is Melissa Roberto. She's a sweetheart, and she is a reporter. She's very involved in entertainment media, and she was quite interested in finding me. I guess she must have found me through Facebook, which surprises me. I mean, well, I do post a lot, and I've become very open about my transition because I got tired of living in the closet, and I feel that it's better to express my inner feelings and what it's like to be transgender. I've come to terms with it. I've shared it with my family. My son is my biggest supporter, and I'm very proud of him. And I just want to live my life the way I've always felt. You know, when you struggle in life, you know, it's not easy, and you know, life is filled with challenges, and we're always taught that we should aim high and look to accomplish and do as best that we can. And that was instilled in me by my parents at a very young age. And I always tried to do the right things in my life. You know, I was very mixed up as a kid because I knew I had some issues. My main dilemma was growing up feeling I was in the wrong body. I pretty much knew at a very young age, and Melissa Roberto was asking me to kind of give her a background in how I felt growing up and what was life like for me, and how did I come out. And it was a very difficult road for me personally, because I was very closed off and I was very shy, and I wasn't comfortable opening up about my transgender situation. And to be quite honest with you, I just didn't really know really what was wrong. All I knew was boys don't dress like girls, and I had to try not to do it, but I was drawn to that. I felt very comfortable in dressing in girls' clothes, and it was frustrating because I didn't have really opportunities to dress as often as I wished I could. I did start at a young age though. I was 3, and I told Melissa that, and she was quite surprised how young I was when I started to wear girls' clothes. And typically with transgender individuals, it's not uncommon for them to realize that they identified to the opposite gender that their assigned birth sex was. You know, I obviously knew I was a boy, but I didn't identify that way. I knew in my heart that I was a girl, and I always wanted to live the life of a female. I wanted to wear girls' dresses, and I always enjoyed being feminine and wanting to put on makeup and nail polish and do my hair up and put bows in it and just be extremely girly. And that was my life. I fantasized. I just wanted to be a girl, and I felt very feminine, and I just didn't know how to express it to people. I basically lived in the closet, and it was very painful for me. And, you know, I don't know sometimes how I did manage in my life to do the things that I set out to do. And I had struggled, and it wasn't an easy road for me, but I tried to manage as best I could. And Melissa was kind of trying to understand how I expressed my feelings in relationships with my family and my friends, and I told her quite honestly that it was a secret that I maintained all throughout my life, and I really didn't come out. As much as I wanted to, I just didn't feel comfortable. And it took me quite a long time to make that stride to find my way. And I certainly wanted to be a female and live as a female, and I wanted to go and dress and live and be. I wanted to wear shoes like girls do. I loved wearing pantyhose. Pink was one of my favorite colors, and I was really very feminine because my dresses that I wore as I got older were designed for a petite woman, and I was kind of small framed, and I wanted to be extremely feminine. And growing up was a battle, and trying to balance my feminine desires to my pretend world of being masculine. I kind of had to fake it and try to overcompensate, and I wasn't really comfortable. I didn't want to be male, and I felt very awkward, but I really had no choice. You know, I grew up in the early 60s, and I never really knew much about being transgender. You know, I heard about transsexuals, not much, aside from the tennis player, Renee Richards. But I knew at 12 what a transsexual was, and I read about Dr. Renee Richards, and I knew right away that I was transsexual, and it wasn't a shock to me. in actuality, I kind of processed it rather well. Because look, I figured, I am what I am, and I can't help that. That's just the way it is. But the problem was that I couldn't tell anybody, and that was my dilemma. It was very frustrating because as much as I wanted to do it and come out and live to be the female that I always identified as, I just didn't know how to express it. And, I was afraid. And, you know, I was very concerned about how my family, especially my parents, would have, how they would have taken it if I tried to explain it to them. And I remember going over and over in my head a proposed way to try to explain it, and I just didn't feel comfortable, and I was scared. And unfortunately my parents had their own medical issues. My mom had struggled with depression. She was in and out of hospitals. And my dad had struggled also with depression. And he also had experienced some tragedies in his line of work as an iron worker, which led him to escape those stressors by drinking. And that was a very hard thing for him to control. So I knew that I really couldn't open up about how I felt. So I had to internalize it and just keep it inside. And sure, I was upset and felt very isolated and lost, but in reality there was nothing I could do. And I didn't have many friends, and certainly I wouldn't confide in anybody. And if I were to confide in anyone, I would probably feel more comfortable confiding in sharing my feelings with a girl. But unfortunately, I never really had those kind of relationships where I felt comfortable talking with girls. I didn't have relationships with many people to begin with, but I was very shy and awkward, and I was extremely shy with girls, even though I wanted to be like them and wanted to be a part of the group. I just didn't know how to relate, because I had two dynamics going on. I was trying to live the life of a guy, a male, by overcompensating. But in reality, I wanted to live as a female, a girl, and express that beautiful side, the feminine side. And, for me, going through my around the cusp of puberty, the early teenage years, it really was a tough time. And I was jealous and envious of the girls, because here they were developing into beautiful young women. They were developing their breasts. It was amazing. All of a sudden, they were just young women, and I was fascinated. I wish that I had that kind of development. And I was very sad because I knew that it wasn't going to happen for me. And I had to come to that painful realization that even though I identified as a girl and I wanted to be accepted and live as a girl, if I didn't open up and talk about it, how would anybody know? So I was destined to live a very sheltered, isolated, and withdrawn life because I was living in the closet. And the only way I felt comfortable was when I had the opportunity to cross-dress. And when you're a young teenager, how are you going to get clothes? I couldn't get girl clothes. I was like, not even working. I had no money. And when I went to the mall, if I saw something I liked, a dress or something, I would want to try to get it. And I obviously wanted to buy it, but I didn't have money. So on one or two occasions, I took a risk. Luckily, I never got caught. But I remember trying on a dress. I had like 2 dresses, but I wrapped up one of the dress within the other, so it looked like I only had one dress. And I had my boy clothes on. And when I went into the dressing room, actually, let me back up a second. I had to pretend when I went into the dressing room that I was going in with boy clothes. I was wearing boy clothes, but what I'm trying to say is I had a dress underneath male clothing, boy clothes. So it looked like I was trying on boy clothes, but I was concealing the dress underneath the boy clothes. And when I was in the dressing room, I would put the dress on, and then I would put back on my clothes, the boy clothes, over the dress. And I had ripped off the tag. There was no security tag. It was just the price, what do you call it? I can't believe I can't even think of it. What do you call it? This thing you scan, the ticket, whatever they call it. And I ripped that off and concealed the dress underneath my clothes. And then I walked out of the dressing room and put the boy clothes that I concealed the dress under back on the rack, and I proceeded to walk out the store. And that was my first dress that I owned. I didn't have the money to buy it, and I desperately wanted to wear a dress. So that was how I was able to cross-dress. I felt very guilty, and it's a very hard reality when you're transgender and you're desperate to wear girls' clothes as a boy, and you'll do almost anything to be able to express that side of you, even though you're doing it secretly. There's something very exciting when you're all dressed and feminine and feeling good about yourself. And I just loved that feeling. I felt very comfortable. I didn't have the when I could dress only in the girl clothes. It was beautiful. It was really not so comfortable when I had to wear boy clothes over my girl clothes. But I had no choice. I couldn't go out dressed like a girl. God forbid. But I always found a way to have at least a dress on, and it made me feel comfortable. And I was trying to explain to my friend Melissa, who I thought was really a very good interviewer. She was very impressive, and she was very thorough, and it was a nice experience. And I was very flattered that she reached out to me and wanted to interview me. Now, I never really had that happen. You know, I get my point of view out there, and I share my experiences, and I don't want to oversaturate the Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or Pinterest. But the reality is I want to open my world, and I want to share my story and express what I always hid. When you can come out and live your life and be open about it, there's no better feeling in the world. It took me many years to come to that point. And when Melissa was interviewing me, she assumed that I transitioned much earlier than I actually did. I transitioned at the age of 51. I tried unsuccessfully to transition much earlier. And in fact, the earliest that I really wanted to transition was back in high school. Before I graduated, I wanted to try to transition at 17, 18, but that was impossible. How could I, as a boy, all of a sudden come out and say to the school administration that I'm going to start presenting as a girl? It just wasn't going to happen. But I was lucky, and I told Melissa that I was a runner on the cross-country team. My coach, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, recruited me and instilled in me confidence to run on the cross-country team. And that helped me. And I was telling Melissa that I was like a geek in high school. I was into the math and the science. And I was an athlete on the cross-country team. So I had those things going on that kind of helped me to deal with the gender dysphoria. I always had that going on, the gender issue. But it was nice that at least I had these other things in my life to kind of give me a sense of escape from the gender struggle. And I felt very comfortable, and it was a very helpful experience to draw upon the running. And coach would run us every day, and we would run about 10 miles a day, and we had some tough workouts. And coach was a very strict disciplinarian, so he taught me a lot and gave me a lot of self-confidence. So I am very appreciative to my coach. And I was going through a tough time because my mom was sick and she was in the hospital, and it was not easy. It was a tough time. And when you're in high school, you got so many dynamics going on. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do after high school, and I wasn't sure where I was going to study. So I took the approach that I would kind of find myself, and I spoke to mom and dad, and I determined that going to a local community college, Nassau Community, was probably my best bet. And I wanted to try to go into engineering. So I took the prerequisites for a 4-year engineering program. At Nassau, I took the first 2 years, which basically are the math and physics requirements. I took calculus, I took physics, heat and sound, fluid mechanics, principles of thermodynamics, strength of materials, differential equations, inorganic chemistry 1 and 2. So I took all the prerequisite engineering classes that is typical in the first 2 years of a bachelor's degree program, with the intention of transferring the credits to a 4-year school. And I graduated at Nassau after 2 years with an associate's degree in engineering science, and I transferred to Virginia Tech. And when I went to Virginia, I was telling Melissa that I really didn't have much time to concede to my gender issues, because I was so busy at the library studying. I was studying 2 subject areas. I was studying mechanical engineering, and I also wanted to bring into that accounting. So I was kind of trying to study math, engineering, and business, and integrate the 3 of those subject areas. And I focused on